You can tell I'm excited about this ARPA funding because I look so optimistic in this photo. We can skip to the next slide. So my name is Scott Ogilvie. I work for the City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency. I primarily work on transportation planning and transportation projects, also some land use things, some long use things related to transit. And Kelly invited me to talk about the transportation projects that the city has funded primarily through the ARPA funding. So the American Recovery Plan Act is a large allocation of federal funding. City of St. Louis got a pretty healthy allocation of that funding, which we're very pleased about, somewhere north of $450 million. These transportation projects account for about 10% of that total funding. So $46 million is what we'll be talking through here. But this does not represent all of the projects the city has right now. We have lots more projects, which I'll touch briefly on at the end. So this project, the umbrella term for this project, City of St. Louis Principal Arterial Traffic Safety Improvements. And so this is basically 6 corridors from west to east. It's Goodfellow, Union, Kings Highway, Grand, South Jefferson, and some streets downtown, Broadway, 4th, and Washington, where especially during the pandemic, we had significant traffic safety and reckless driving activity going on. Additionally, there are improvements at 10 crash hotspots, which are distributed throughout the city. We picked those based on data, and it's a mix of vehicular crash hotspots and pedestrian crash and injury hotspots. You can go to the next slide. So overall, 46 million, which I mentioned, it's a little bit more than 30 miles of streets on these corridors. And this is something we as a city almost never get to do. We never get to go out and repave like a whole street from beginning to end. We were very frequently just doing little bits here and there, 6 blocks here, a half mile over there. So as Bethany mentioned, especially because we rely not exclusively, but primarily on ward capital for funding for repaving. A lot of times that's a ward by ward process. And these arterials cross many wards, and they are also the most expensive streets to make improvements to. It's much cheaper to make improvements to a neighborhood street compared to a major roadway. Common across all these projects, they're all getting fully repaved, so that's the big thing. They're all getting ADA and curb ramp work. When I say ADA work, I mean making the curb ramps at the intersections accessible. Some of these corridors will also get some additional sidewalk work in certain locations. But I will stress that these are not full roadway reconstruction projects. Has anybody driven on Jefferson and Parnell, North Jefferson and Parnell the last? Yes. So we recently just completely rebuilt that roadway. Everything is new. So sidewalks new, lighting is new, traffic signals are new, pavements new, all the stuff is new, new trees, new landscaping. That's a level above these improvements. So those types of improvements are going to be like $10 million or more per mile. Here we're more in the like $1.5 million per mile range. So we are fixing what's out there to the extent we can with the funding, but we are not completely rebuilding everything. Slide. Oh, and schedule. Everything's under design right now. We're most of the way through the design. We will be wrapping up design on all these corridors in the next few weeks. Most of the work is going to be done in 2025. We also have 2026. We have to expend the funds by the end of 2026. And some has actually started. If you're on North Kings Highway, north of Dr. MLK, you've seen curb replacement, sidewalk work, ramp replacement. That's part of this. And that's kind of the first work that we've been doing with this funding. Slide. So I'm going to run through, again, west to east, all the projects, just give you a little project detail on each corridor. If you're really interested in one of these, stop me as we go. So there's a lot of similarities, but there are all unique corridors. They're each being designed individually. They will share some features, but there are some distinctions between the corridors. So Goodfellow, we're resurfacing that from Delamar to Halls Ferry Circle. Parking lane bump outs. So I'll say that a bunch, so I'll just explain what that is now. You know what a parking lane is? On-street parking. It's about 8 feet wide. Put a car there. When that lane is not occupied by a vehicle, what happens a lot of the time? Insane. Exactly. Somebody uses it to drive, to pass on the right side, to speed. And so a lot of these projects will be filling in certain of those spots with little bump outs to make that driving behavior less appealing. Excuse me. Especially near intersections. So near intersections, you want to keep cars away from the intersection for visibility, both for drivers. Charles is signaling. Oh, maybe. Bring me up an emergency water just in case. Thank you. You want to be able to see around the intersection, so that's a big safety feature, both for drivers and vehicles, and especially for pedestrians. Drivers need to be able to see pedestrians. Pedestrians need to be able to see drivers. So we'll be kind of clearing out the parking from those corners, which is a safety enhancement. That'll be a common theme throughout. So we've touched on that now. All these projects will get what we call high visibility crosswalk markings. So those are the larger white blocks. We're building them all out of more durable materials, what we call a thermoplastic material. So it's not paint. So you paint a crosswalk and the paint is usually gone a year, 18 months later, it just wears off. The thermoplastic is a plastic sheet that is melted into the asphalt, and that'll last as long as the asphalt. It's also usually more visible at night. So those are common improvements. Do people know what a road diet is? Road diet is a lane reduction generally. So the common one is you got 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. You go to 3 lanes, 1 in each direction with a center turning lane. That is a dramatically safer roadway cross section. All the data supports that. So on this project, north of Natural Bridge, oh, I see my wife is here to get our daughter. She'll find. Thank you again, Charles. Playing sidekick role. Thanks, Charles. Road diet, Natural Bridge up to I-70. And then north of I-70, Goodfellow gets a little wider. Right now, it's a 3-lane section with bike lanes. We had a prior traffic study there, and we're doing some additional safety improvements in that segment, which I think in particular has some speeding issues because the street is wider there. So that'll include things like center medians in some places in that center turning lane so people don't pass in the center turning lane. And some other improvements, especially near Halls Ferry Circle. It's 2 lanes in and out of the circle right now. It really should just be 1 lane in, 1 lane out. So we'll make those improvements. Almost wrapped up design. We haven't had a public open house on this one yet, but we will in the next couple of weeks, not yet scheduled. We'll email Kelly when we schedule it. Slide. Ooh, these are a little hard to see. So one feature I didn't mention, actually, you guys know the really wide segment of Goodfellow that it's south of I-70 and it's north of Natural Bridge. It's like super wide. It's the widest street in the city of St. Louis. Is this ringing it? The Federal Center is on, yeah. You couldn't do it. It's impossible. You probably could. It's like 100 feet wide, which is it's much wider than it needs to be. So that segment is also getting it's tough because if we were going to rebuild that, we would rebuild a totally different street. But when we're kind of working with the existing curbs, we want to shrink the street to the extent we can. And so there we're going to do what we call parking protected bike lane. So that's an image of Union, but we're going to do something similar where we move the parking away from the curb. We're going to build some concrete medians, and the bike lanes will be against the curb. Is there a lot of biking on that section of Goodfellow now? There's not, but we're trying to do something to eat up some of the roadway space to make the driving safer and to make it safer for anybody just using that corridor. If you're walking, the sidewalk is small. You might be right next to vehicles. So this moves the vehicle away from the pedestrian. And if you're riding a scooter or something, or you happen to be pushing a baby stroller, maybe you just do it in the bike lane because it's smoother. It'll be freshly resurfaced rather than the sidewalk. Slide. Union. Union is probably the lowest volume and narrowest of these roads overall. So it's getting resurfacing, Delmar up to West Florissant, parking lane bump outs again, high visibility crosswalks. Right now, the bike lanes on Union go from the park up to just north of, actually they go to Page. So we're gonna extend them from Page to Natural Bridge with this project. And it gets curb ramps and ADA improvements at all the intersections. And we have the open house for this one scheduled for next Thursday if you want to see it in more detail. I can tell you where it is. Hold on. It is. Yes, Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, 1500 Union Boulevard, 63113. You'll be there. All right. See you next Thursday. Slide. So that's an image of a lot of those parking lane bump outs we'll be doing. That one's, I think that one's on Arsenal in Benton Park, but they'll look a lot like that. In some cases, if they're at an intersection, we like to put the stop sign on them because it makes the stop sign more visible. But they'll also be kind of mid-block, just taking up space in some locations. And then most of the bike lanes will be conventional bike lanes in this stretch because we don't have room for parking protected bike lanes. Slide. Kings Highway. The next two are the big ones, Kings Highway and Grand. Kings Highway and Grand vary a lot through the corridors. They're long corridors, 9 miles each. And so we're doing different things in different parts of these corridors that are context specific to the amount of traffic and to the adjacent land use on these corridors. So the whole thing's getting resurfaced. The whole corridor will be ADA accessible. And that's actually, well, all the intersections at least, that's a big deal. If you're riding a bus, if you're using a wheelchair or other mobility device, there are lots of places where you encounter a lot of difficulties in St. Louis, just using the sidewalk or navigating an intersection. So really happy to see the whole corridor end to end be ADA compliant. At the south end, we're doing a road diet, adding some bike lanes where the traffic volume is much lower. A big part of this project, well, I'm out of order. Okay, two big parts. One big part, and this is something Christy was talking about. We had a real safety issue from Lindell up to Dr. MLK, so that segment is getting more funding so we can do more improvements in that segment. There'll be a road diet, there'll be a center median, and there'll be a variety of traffic calming features, hopefully to get vehicle speeds down. Also, on Kings Highway from Lindell to Dr. MLK, and there'll be like extra improvements both at the Lindell and Kings Highway intersection and at the Delmar and Kings Highway intersection, which is like way bigger and wider than it needs to be. And both those streets are pretty like busy bus routes. There's a lot of pedestrians crossing there and the crossings are super wide. So improvements of both of those. We're kind of realigning some stuff at West Pine and Lindell along the northeast corner of Forest Park. A big part of this project was access to Tower Grove Park. So we've heard over the years a lot of concerns about accessing Tower Grove Park across Kings Highway. And so this is a tricky part because traffic volume is pretty high on that part of Kings Highway. But we're adding a center median, which will make it safer to cross the street. We're actually adding probably a traffic signal, an additional traffic signal kind of between Arsenal and Magnolia, like a pedestrian actuated signal. So people can cross fewer lanes of traffic with the median and access the park there. And then north of MLK up to I-70. This part's already under construction. Right now it's 3 lanes on each side of the median. We're going to take that down to 2 lanes. The curb lane will be a parking lane instead of a driving lane. And then we're doing a lot of crossing safety things. So if you've seen it, we're building like crosswalks through those medians Right now, if you're crossing Kings Highway, you're kind of like going around the median. The sidewalk will go straight through the median, which is safer. And so you're not exposed to vehicles, and that's already getting built. Slide. Okay, those are hard to see, but on the right is, you can see that median adjacent to Tower Grove Park. Some modifications to the entrance. We'll go to the next slide. And here you can see some of the stuff already under construction, North Kings Highway. Next up is Grand. So one of the super exciting things about Grand, and this is a Christie thing too, North Grand is really high on the list on the high injury network for fatalities and serious injuries. So we were resurfacing Grand, but we get a bonus on North Grand because Great Rivers Greenway, in cooperation with the city, both the city and GRG are funding this project, are building the Brickline Greenway on North Grand. Thank you, Craig. It's a super cool project. So next year we'll be repaving all of Grand, but the Brickline will also be under construction at the same time. And that's a full rebuild project. So everything, the whole right of way, will be taken from the very, insufficient state of that road now to as nice as you can make a street, I would say. So it'll be safer, it'll look tons better. There'll be a multi-use facility, bikes, runners, just public space for people. And that is also just one of the most unsafe stretches of road. So it should become just much safer for everybody using it. So that's a huge highlight. Then north of there, this project is going to allow us to build parking protected bike lanes to kind of extend the connectivity along the east side of Fairground Park, and then continuing north to like the Hyde Park Water Tower, then kind of Hall Street. You can actually, anybody been on the Riverfront Trail, you can access it from Grand and Hall Street right there. So it'll kind of link all the way north to the Riverfront Trail. And then on the through the mid part, not as much is changing. It's by the highways. There's not as much we can do there. And then as we get south, like south of South Grand, we'll do a bike lane extension from Utah down to Chippewa. So I think adding like 3/4 of a mile of bike lane south of the business district. And then as we go further south, it's 3 lanes right now, but we're going to add some medians in that center turning lane because we get a lot of dangerous driving behavior there. And we've got Jersey barriers in the middle lane right now, which are making it safer, but don't look good. So we'll make those permanent medians. And I think those are the highlights. Next slide. I think we're hopefully going to do some cool bus stop markings on this project. Grand, as you guys know, probably highest ridership bus route, best service, not as good as it used to be, but hopefully coming back to more frequent service. And so we want to highlight where those bus stops are and make sure drivers don't park in it and block the bus stop. So hopefully we'll do some cool bus stop markings through this corridor. Slide. And then this is a slide of Brickline Greenway. We could do, maybe you have done, I don't know, you might have done a whole session on this project. They'd love to come talk to you about it. But just super cool. You can picture North Grand in your mind right now. And here, so just kind of run through. So new landscaping, new trees, sidewalk, kind of a planting strip that'll be between the sidewalk and the multi-use trail. The multi-use trail it'll look a lot like the segment that's right by the MLS stadium on Market Street right now. Same kind of brick line of brick detail down the middle. More landscaping, these kind of big landscaped bump outs at the corners, road diet, so it'll be 3 lanes, and like much safer to cross Grand, and we'll definitely have a traffic calming effect. We would love to be able to do this type of project everywhere. We can't do it everywhere because this is like $25 million a mile, and we've got 1,300 miles of street in the city. So 25 million a mile. Yep. That's what it takes to go from zero to hero in your streets. But I think this is the best work we can do, and we can also, you take maybe elements of this type of project and put it into other projects, even if you can't do the full thing. Slide. And then South Jefferson. Sorry, Craig. This is the most boring one, because South Jefferson is also, Craig lives near there. South Jefferson is also the line for the future Metrolink Green Line expansion. So we didn't want to kind of go too far on this project because it's kind of an interim resurfacing, because the city is working very hard towards accessing federal funding to try to build Metrolink Green Line. That'd be a great session too, Kelly. And so just resurfacing and some safety improvements on South Jefferson. Slide. One thing I will point out, we've got a bad intersection, Gravois and Jefferson. So there will be some safety improvements there. There's some like dead space that's a like center turning lane. That's not a turning lane, so we're going to fill it in with medians, make the crossings safer. And hopefully we'll have a safety project on Gravois just east of here also. Slide. Oh, I forgot downtown. Okay, downtown, 4th Broadway and Washington. 4th and Broadway is at Paris Streets. 4th goes north. Broadway goes south out of downtown. So we're going to add a cycle track on 4th Street. So that's a 2-way bike facility. So there'll be one less vehicular lane. This will be protected by a concrete median. So take you in and out of downtown from the south. And then Broadway, the next street over, we'll get a road diet just with a lot of bump outs. It's just very wide. There's not, traffic volume is down since the pandemic. And these streets just don't need to, like rush hour peaks are just not what they used to be. So they're too wide, and then especially at night, you get people driving crazy. So we're going to try to slow them down a little bit. And then Washington, there's also periodically, I think it's a lot better than it was a few years ago, but some reckless driving behavior. So Washington's getting some updates, and we're doing a raised intersection at Washington and whatever the front of the, I think it's 8th, the front of the convention center. So you got a lot of pedestrian activity there. Convention center worries a lot about pedestrian safety there. So we'll raise the intersection up. So the whole intersection is like a speed hump. So hopefully slows vehicles down, just makes it a prominent location that drivers hopefully respect, and doing some other safety improvements there too. So those are our $45 million of ARPA funded street improvements. Next slide. Oh, you can kind of see the cycle track there. Next slide. Oh, the hotspots. We're also doing these spot improvements throughout the city. I mentioned we picked these based on high vehicular crash or pedestrian crash locations. These are basically just intersections where we either did or did not have a corridor project and thought needed help anyway. So some of them are on the corridors, and it means we get to just put a little more money into those locations. Some of them are off the corridors, but we'll do some spot improvements there. Slide. So this is kind of a sidebar. I got 3 minutes. We put up a really nice map recently of all the city's major transportation projects. We still, I think, struggle to communicate what we are doing, but we have a much higher level of investment in projects right now than we did 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. We want to tell the story about those projects, also just let people know they're happening, because we fund them, and then a lot of the time it takes several years to actually build them. So if you scan that QR code or go to that very long URL on the bottom, you can see a description of kind of all these project types, the kind of stuff we're doing, and an interactive map that has all of the major projects. These are not ward capital projects. These are big projects across the city. It'll give links to websites with more information, hopefully a project year or year to get built. And we intend to just keep this updated so we can communicate better with residents across the city where we're making investments. Slide. And then I've got a couple slides about some of the stuff on that table. So the city also, funded by ARPA, is doing a citywide transportation mobility plan. It's very exciting for me because I work in planning. Does anybody know, does the city have a transportation? No, we don't. Very unusual for a city not to have a transportation plan in 2024 or 2014 or 2004. So we're finally, yeah. We're finally going to get one. We haven't really done this since like the 60s when we were building highways, and like the transportation paradigm is different. So the big thing, this is not so much about projects, right? We've been talking about projects. This isn't really about projects. This is about what do we want to do with our transportation system? What are the values? What's our vision for it? What are the goals? What are the things we care about? When I say value, it's like, do we care about roadway capacity more? Do we care about safety more? Do we care about, building new things more? Or do we care about maintaining the stuff we have more? So this is a chance to talk to residents all throughout the city and just get like on these basic things, what are people's priorities? We're doing that right now. There's a statistically valid survey that we're like doing right now, and then we're going to put that up online so you all can take it once we get enough initial responses. We've got 4 open houses coming up, which are on the next slide. Nope, they're on the next slide, but we'll stay here. But just some highlights. So values, vision, goals. But we've been doing like a lot of interviews with city staff at the beginning of this process, so they know about it and they can give us input into it. We're working on a policy and ordinance review. There's lots of policies and ordinances that touch on transportation or transportation funding in some way. So we're working through those. We're working through a street design guide that forms just kind of a baseline of what different types of streets in the city, what the ideal version of those streets looks like. We're building off of the safety action plan. We're taking all of that data, and I'll say we are already using that data that Christy was talking about. We're already kind of getting our first project from that teed up, which I can't talk about in detail yet, but it's great data. That project is really good. We're going to build a little more into it in terms of what the city can do to respond to it. So that'll go into this TMP, Transportation Mobility Plan. We had our first community advisory meeting, Mr. Stringfellow. There he is. Yes, he's on the committee. And we're really in the like gathering input phase right now from the public, and then we'll get into like later in the fall and winter into kind of really plan development and writing the plan. But now is when there's something you care about, you can go online and tell us right now. TMP website, take that survey that's coming up. I'll go to the open houses. Now I'll go to the next slide. So we got 4 open houses. We've got paper over there. They're on the website. This is just chance to come through, talk to the project team about your goals and hopes and dreams for transportation in St. Louis, and we hope you come. First one is 21st, I think. We've got like a Central West, we got like a Forest Park one, a downtown one, a north one, and a south one. Everybody you can come to all 4 if you want, but they're coming up late September, early October. And I think that's it. Is that yes, okay. Thank you guys. Yes. Yeah. Well, partially yes. So, I mean, to be honest, so when the city, you're talking about NGA when you say, yeah. So when the city, and it was like a big team effort to keep that in the city. The city made some commitments to make some infrastructure improvements. And so Jefferson, now we've finished Jefferson, we made a commitment. Cass, we're going to be rebuilding 20th Street as well as kind of a parallel bike corridor, and Jefferson is kind of the vehicular corridor. And then GRG eventually is going to rebuild St. Louis Avenue from like roughly Grand to like Florissant. So around NGA, there is going to be a lot of investments. I would say, and all those locations needed investment anyway, but that the NGA project really did bump it up as a bigger priority. I would say every place deserves trees, but the way we prioritize the, yeah, right. Who deserves the nice stuff? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's not. Yeah. We don't have a perfect system right now. What I, or in some cases, any system. So and part of that is because we don't have a citywide transportation plan, right? So the TMP is supposed to kind of inform like how do we make decisions, and then also this safety action plan that East West Gateway just did. The data is really good, and it I think will become like one of the key inputs into where does the city need to make investments to make improvements to these areas that have really poor safety records. So I've been working through this, and it's chaotic. It has been chaotic, but I feel like we're on the trajectory to be able to make like much more informed decisions and ensure equitable investment and like fix the worst stuff first. I feel like we are going in that direction. And the other thing is we just have so many more projects than we had a few years ago that we are touching already on a lot of these high injury locations. So, but it's a great, I mean, come tell the city at the TMP, you need to figure out like a standard kind of way to prioritize things. Yeah. You got a question?
I did. Apologies, I came in late. You may have covered this. This is more of an inquiry. The planters, I don't know if that's the correct term. There are several planters in several neighborhoods, Hamilton Heights, College Hill, Academy Park. Some of them are used to slow traffic down and kind of slow some of the residential streets down, but they're all in decay.
Yeah.
None of them are being maintained. I kind of partnered with certain older people. I didn't know if it was their duty, but is that a part of the transportation?
So that kind of like landscaping stuff is something the city really cannot maintain on our own. And so we really rely on residents or neighborhood associations or some third party to do that stuff. We just, streets director Williams was here before, and she mentioned just like how short staffed they are in general for the essentials. And so, you know, what the city can really do is like cut grass in parks and trim trees. They just really cannot do other enhanced landscaping. So if they're there, if you're working on it, thank you. We appreciate that. But I think that's the path to do it is kind of resident action will take care of those.
Not to take too much time up, but I'm asking, is there some kind of pilot program? A lot of older people are not even aware of it when I speak to them. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's resources already in the ward to maintain some of those things. I've asked Operation Brightside. I've spoken to several different organizations, but there is no concerted effort.
Correct. Yeah.
To maintain these spaces because they serve multiple. They're filled with trash. Sometimes they're stopping accidents, and I just think it's a pivotal marker that should be addressed at some point. just asking to just kind of pilot program for the residents that are interested to get some kind of funding to do that.
I wish I could say yes, but I can't. Yeah. Yes.
I went to the open house at Lowe's when they were talking about like Kings Highway and like the certain changes and how like certain areas are getting, a lot of them getting road died because like you said, drop in population, stuff like that. Is there any thoughts around like what if this like certain areas come back? Like, so could these be like not reversed easily, but like I guess like redesigned with that in mind?
Yeah, so a lot of them could be reversed. So some of them are really striping, and you can change that, every time you resurface the road. And then a lot of those bump outs, I mean, they're infrastructure, but they are infrastructure that could be removed if you had to remove it. It's not like moving the whole curb or changing the drainage. I will say that, so most of the time we do a road diet, like we have traffic volumes, and there's usually like a real margin where it's comfortable that you can take the lane count down. And the crazy thing is like a roadway that has one lane in each direction with a center turning lane will carry about 95% as much traffic as a roadway with 2 lanes in each direction, just because the turning is so much more efficient. And so it's usually fine. The city we've reversed one road diet we've done, and we've done a bunch. We reversed one on Van Deventer that was really close to Highway 44, and it didn't really work after it went in, and they did reverse it. But otherwise, I think we find that there is often a little, I think it's changing, but there's often a little hesitancy from people that are like, is it going to be a problem? But usually we get positive feedback actually afterwards. Like, oh, I was a little worried, but it does feel safer. And so usually the feedback is yeah. Okay.
When you were talking about the medians,
Yes.
you were talking about suicide lanes, right? We call them suicide
Yeah.
lanes, where you go in the middle.
I call them a center turning lane.
But here's the issue. You talked about this earlier. Is that when there's traffic on where people park,
Yeah.
that's where people drive through, or they drive. They start their turn like a block away.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying, the planters.
Yeah.
That come into place.
Right. So what we're doing, so a lot of times when we have that center turning lane, we're adding medians into that space, so you can only turn at appropriate spaces and you can't just drive through it. Yeah. And actually, like, so on Goodfellow, the north section of Goodfellow has a bunch of those planters in the parking lane. As part of one of these projects, those will be removed, and just like a lower island will be put there that serves the same purpose of making sure people don't drive there, but it won't accumulate trash and all that stuff. So yeah. Okay. You bet. Thank you, Kelly. Much appreciated.